The lawyer slid the domain transfer agreement across the mahogany table, and I watched my sister Melissa's perfectly manicured nails tap against the paper with barely concealed glee. "Just sign it, Claire," my mother said, her voice carrying that exhausted tone she reserved exclusively for me. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I looked down at the document that would transfer techvista.com, my domain, the one I'd registered 6 years ago when I was 22 and stupid enough to think my family would be happy for my success, into Melissa's name. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage so pure it felt like swallowing battery acid. "This is theft," I said quietly. My father didn't even look up from his phone. "It's family. Melissa needs this opportunity more than you do. She has the business degree. She has the connections. You've just been lucky." Lucky. That word had followed me my entire life. Lucky that my little blog about emerging technology took off. Lucky that my newsletter about startup culture gained 50,000 subscribers. Lucky that tech companies started paying me 5 figures for a single sponsored post on techvista.com. Lucky, lucky, lucky. Never talented, never hardworking, never deserving. "I built TechVista from nothing," I said, hating how my voice cracked. "I was working 16-hour days while taking classes, writing every single article myself. And now Melissa will take it to the next level," my mother interrupted. "She's already been approached by 3 venture capital firms who want to invest, but they won't do it while the domain is in your name. You're not credible enough." The knife twisted. Melissa had been spreading lies about me for months, that I'd hired ghostwriters, that I'd bought my traffic, that I was on the verge of legal trouble for undisclosed sponsorships. None of it was true, but she'd been strategic, whispering to the right people at the right networking events while I was locked in my apartment, grinding out content. "If you don't sign," Melissa said, finally speaking up, her voice honey-sweet, "Mom and Dad are prepared to sue you for return of the funds they invested in your education. With interest and legal fees." She smiled. "That would be about $200,000, which I know you don't have." I felt the trap close around me. They'd planned this perfectly. The domain was worth potential millions, but I was cash poor, living paycheck to paycheck, despite the revenue because I kept reinvesting everything into growing the platform. I couldn't fight them in court. I could barely afford rent. My hand moved to the pen. I watched myself sign my name, each letter a small death. "Smart choice," my father said, still not looking at me. I stood up, leaving the conference room in the downtown law office my parents had paid for. Melissa called after me. "Don't be dramatic, Claire. We'll still let you write for the site. Just as a contributor, for exposure." Her laughter followed me into the elevator. 3 months later, I stood on the edge of the Aurora Bridge in Seattle, looking down at the cold water of Lake Union. TechVista.com had just been sold to a media conglomerate for $8 million. Melissa's face was on the cover of Forbes' 30 Under 30 issue. The article called her a visionary entrepreneur and mentioned me only as a former contributor who helped with early content. My parents had thrown her a celebration party at a yacht club. I wasn't invited. I'd spent the last 90 days watching everything I built get credited to someone else. Watching Melissa take meetings with people who used to respect me. Watching her give talks about entrepreneurship and disruption and authenticity while wearing the designer clothes she'd bought with my money from my work. The wind whipped my hair across my face. The water looked very far away and very final. I thought about my goldfish, Mr. Bubbles, alone in my studio apartment. Who would feed him? It was such a stupid thought that I started laughing, and then I was crying, and then I was stepping forward. The impact of the water knocked the air from my lungs. The cold was absolute. I sank, and the darkness welcomed me, and I thought, at least I won't have to see Melissa's success anymore. Everything went black. I gasped awake, choking on air instead of water, and immediately vomited over the side of my bed. Except it wasn't my bed. The comforter was purple with white polka dots, the one I'd had in college, the one I'd thrown out years ago. The walls were covered in posters of bands I'd loved at 20. My laptop was the ancient MacBook with the cracked screen that I'd replaced in 2015. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. The lock screen made my heart stop. September 18th, 2014. It was the date I'd registered techvista.com. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the phone. No Face ID, I had to use a password. That's how old this device was. I opened the calendar app. Yes, September 18th, 2014. The day I'd had my first viral post on Medium about the future of wearable technology. The day I decided to create a permanent home for my writing. The day I'd gone to GoDaddy and registered the domain name, sitting in this exact dorm room, drinking lukewarm coffee, and feeling like I was taking the first step towards something important. I ran to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My face was softer, rounder, no fine lines around my eyes. My hair was longer, dyed that unfortunate burgundy color I'd thought was edgy. I was 22 years old again. This was impossible. This was real. I had died, and somehow, impossibly, I'd been sent back. My mind raced through the implications. I had 8 years of knowledge that hadn't happened yet. I knew which startups would explode, which cryptocurrencies would surge, which platforms would become dominant. I knew what mistakes I'd made. Most importantly, I knew exactly about my paita. Family would betray me. I pulled up GoDaddy on my ancient laptop. In my original timeline, I'd registered techvista.com at 3:47 p.m. on this day. It was currently 9:22 a.m. The domain was still available. My finger hovered over the purchase button. Then I stopped. If I registered it now, everything would play out the same way. I'd build the site, my family would eventually realize its value, and they'd find a way to take it from me again. Maybe the details would be different, but the outcome would be identical. They'd always seen me as less than Melissa, always believed she deserved my success more than I did. No, I needed to be smarter this time. I needed to make them think TechVista wasn't worth taking. I registered the domain at exactly 3:47 p.m., just as I had before, maintaining the timeline. Then I created the WordPress site and started writing. But this time, I had 8 years of hindsight about what content would perform. My first article in the original timeline had been 5 wearable tech trends to watch. It had gotten decent traffic, maybe 500 views. This time I wrote why Apple Watch will fail and what it means for wearables. The Apple Watch had been announced, but not released yet. In my original timeline, this contrarian take would have seemed too risky, but I knew the first generation would indeed struggle. It was underpowered, the apps were laggy, and it took until the third generation for it to really find product market fit. I posted it to Hacker News at exactly the time I knew the most tech industry people would be browsing. I shared it to the relevant subreddits. I engaged thoughtfully in the comment sections using all the rhetorical techniques I'd learned over 8 years of writing online. The article went viral. 20,000 views in the first day, 50,000 by the end of the week. The tech press picked it up. I got invited on a podcast. Small sponsorship offers started trickling in. I accepted all of them. Every single dollar I made went into a separate bank account my family didn't know about. I told my parents the site was doing okay and that I'd made a few $100s. I dressed in thrift store clothes. I kept living in my cramped dorm room even though I could have afforded better. I played the part of the struggling student perfectly. Meanwhile, TechVista's traffic grew exponentially. I wrote about the rise of influencer culture 2 years before it exploded. I published a piece about TikTok's potential when it was still musical Dali, and everyone thought it was just a lip-syncing app for kids. I predicted the fall of Vine, the rise of Discord, the staying power of Reddit, versus the decline of Twitter. I was right about everything because I'd already lived through it once. By my senior year, TechVista was generating $20,000 per month in revenue. But I told my family it was making maybe $2,000 on a good month, and that I was thinking about getting a real job after graduation. Melissa had graduated the year before me with her business degree. She was working at a consulting firm and doing well enough, but she was already showing signs of the jealousy that would eventually consume her. She'd scroll through my articles at family dinners, making small comments. "Pretty surface-level analysis," she'd say. "You really should fact-check more carefully." I heard from someone in the industry that TechVista is seen as kind of amateur. I'd nod and agree and play the role of the insecure younger sister. "You're probably right." I'm not really a business person like you. She loved that. The trap was baited. After graduation, I told my family I was going to try to make Tech Vista work for 1 year before getting a real job. My mother sighed dramatically. My father said I was wasting my potential. Melissa offered to mentor me, which meant she wanted access to my processes and contacts. I let her in just enough to feel involved, but not enough to actually understand how I was succeeding. She'd give me advice that I'd pretend to consider, then ignore. She'd introduce me to her business school friends, who'd talk down to me while I secretly knew more about their industries than they did. The years passed. I hit every milestone I'd hit before, but this time I was prepared for what came next. In 2016, I wrote the viral piece about fake news and algorithmic radicalization. 3 months before the election made it a mainstream concern. Major news outlets cited me as a thought leader. In 2017, I published an expose on cryptocurrency scams right as the ICO bubble was forming. I saved thousands of people from losing their money and got death threats from crypto bros for months. In 2018, I broke the story about data privacy concerns with a major social media platform 2 weeks before the Cambridge Analytica scandal went public. I'd known about it in my previous life, but hadn't connected the dots in time. This time, I was ready. Tech Vista became the voice in technology journalism, but I kept playing poor. I lived in a modest apartment in a Seattle suburb. I drove a used Honda. I wore the same rotation of plain t-shirts and jeans. When my family asked how the site was doing, I'd sigh and say, "Paying the bills, barely." Behind the scenes, I was making $250,000 per month. I was being courted by venture capital firms offering 8-figure valuations. I was getting job offers from every major tech company and media organization. I turned everything down because I was waiting for the exact right moment. In April 2019, I got a call from Melissa. "Hey, so I've been thinking," she said, her voice artificially casual. "You know how you've been struggling with Tech Vista? What if I came on board? Like, as a business partner, I could help you monetize better, make connections, maybe get some funding?" There it was, the opening move. "I don't know," I said carefully. I've been doing okay on my own." "Claire," her voice shifted to that patient, condescending tone. "You're my sister. I want to help you, and honestly, I've been watching you struggle for 5 years now. You're a good writer, but you don't understand business. Let me handle that side while you focus on content." I pretended to think about it. "Can I talk to mom and dad?" "Of course. Actually, why don't we all get dinner this weekend? We can discuss it as a family." The family dinner was a replay of my previous life, except this time I knew every move before it happened. Melissa had prepared a whole presentation about scaling Tech Vista's impact. My parents nodded along approvingly. My father said something about how it was time to get serious about the business side. They wanted me to bring Melissa on as a 50-50 partner. I said no. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Claire," my mother said, her voice tight, "we're trying to help you." "I appreciate that, but Tech Vista is mine." "I built it. I'm not giving away half of it." Melissa's mask slipped for just a second. I saw the flash of rage in her eyes. Then she recovered, smiling. "I understand. What about a smaller percentage? Say 25%? I'd bring on my contacts from the consulting world, help you get corporate partnerships." "No," my father set down his fork. "You're being unreasonable." "I'm being protective of my work." "Your work?" Melissa's voice went sharp. "Claire, you write blog posts. I'm offering to turn your hobby into a real business." "It already is a real business." She laughed. "You've told us yourself you're barely making enough to survive. Don't let pride get in the way of a good opportunity." This was the moment. This was where, in my original timeline, they'd started the campaign to convince me I needed them. The whisper campaign about my credibility, the threats about the education costs, the coordinated family pressure. But I wasn't the same Claire anymore. "I think this dinner is over," I said, standing up. "Sit down," my father ordered. "No." I walked out of the restaurant and I didn't look back. The next morning, I received an email from my mother. A formal demand for repayment of all educational expenses, including undergraduate and the 2 years of community college before that. Total $186,000 with interest. I forwarded it to my lawyer, the one I'd hired 3 years ago, knowing this was coming. His response was swift and brutal. I'd been legally an adult when they'd gifted me that money, and there was no loan agreement. They had no standing to demand repayment. If they continued to harass me, we'd pursue a restraining order. My mother called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. Melissa tried a different approach. She posted on Facebook about how sad she was that some people let success change them and forget about family. Her friends flooded the comments with support. My extended family started calling, asking what had happened, why I was being so difficult. I stayed silent. Then I made my move. I knew that in my original timeline, the media conglomerate had approached Melissa about buying Tech Vista in July 2019. They'd offered $8 million, and she'd accepted immediately. But that was only because she'd already stolen the domain from me and spent 3 months making it seem like the site had always been hers. This time, when they approached me directly in June, I was ready. I'm not interested in selling, I told the acquisition team over a video call, but I am interested in a partnership. We negotiated for 3 weeks. The final deal was this. They'd invest $15 million for a 20% stake in Tech Vista Media, the LLC I'd formed years ago in preparation for this. I'd maintain full editorial control. They'd provide infrastructure, sales support, and access to their distribution network. The deal was announced on July 15, 2019. Valuation, $75 million. My family found out from TechCrunch, just like everyone else. The article included a photo of me at the signing, wearing a tailored suit I'd bought specifically for the occasion. It detailed my meteoric rise and called me one of the most influential voices in technology journalism. It mentioned my predictions that had shaped industry conversations. It included quotes from tech CEOs praising my insight and integrity. It did not mention my family at all. My phone exploded with messages. Melissa, what the fuck, Claire? Mom, you lied to us. You told us you were barely making money. Dad, we need to talk about this. Call me immediately. Melissa again. You owe me. I was supposed to be your partner. I could have helped you get this deal. Mom again. How could you be so selfish after everything we've done for you? I blocked all of them. Then I posted on Tech Vista, a personal essay on family ambition and knowing your worth. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. I wrote about being underestimated, about people who wanted to take credit for your work, about family members who saw your success as something they deserved by virtue of proximity, about learning to protect what you built. The essay went massively viral. It got picked up by every major publication. People shared their own stories in the comments. It resonated because everyone had felt dismissed by someone who was supposed to support them. Melissa knew it was about her. So did everyone else who knew us. Her carefully curated image started to crack. People who'd seen her treating me dismissively at networking events came forward with stories. Former classmates talked about how she'd taken credit for group projects. A colleague from her consulting firm revealed she'd been fired 3 months earlier for inflating her contribution to a client proposal. The 30 under 30 profile aged like milk. My parents tried a different approach. They showed up at my apartment building, demanding to see me. Security, which I'd hired with my new resources, turned them away. They tried to reach me through mutual friends. They sent my aunt to mediate. I didn't engage. 3 months after the deal closed, and in October 2019, my lawyer received a letter from my family's attorney. They were suing me for a portion of the company, claiming they'd provided material support for Tech Vista's development and deserved compensation. My lawyer laughed when he read it. They have no case, Bisset, he said. But they can make your life expensive and annoying for a while. Let them try, I said. The lawsuit went public. It was a PR nightmare for them. The narrative immediately became, jealous family tries to steal successful daughter's company. Think pieces proliferated about family dynamics and tall poppy syndrome. Legal experts went on cable news to explain why the lawsuit was baseless. Melissa's LinkedIn profile became a graveyard of deleted connections. Companies that had considered hiring her quietly moved on to other candidates. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice in February 2020. The judge called it frivolous and vexatious and ordered my family to pay my legal fees. I never heard from them again directly, but I kept tabs on what they were doing. Melissa moved back in with my parents. She tried to launch her own media company, Visionary Ventures, but couldn't get any traction. Turns out when you have no actual skills beyond taking credit for other people's work, it's hard to build something from scratch. My parents' social standing in their upper middle class suburb took a hit. They were those people who sued their successful daughter. The yacht club whispers, the country club side eyes. Meanwhile, Tech Vista Media grew exponentially. We launched a podcast network, a documentary division, a tech literacy program for underserved communities. We broke major stories about AI ethics, content moderation, and platform accountability. By 2022, we were valued at $200 million. I bought a house in the San Juan Islands, oceanfront, floor-to-ceiling windows, a library that could hold 10,000 books. I adopted 3 rescue dogs. I started a foundation for first-generation college students pursuing careers in journalism. I was happy, I was free, but I wasn't done. In my original timeline, I'd registered techvista.com for 10 years. That meant the registration would expire in September 2024. When I died in early 2020 in that timeline, Melissa had owned the domain for only a few months. She'd sold it as part of the $8 million deal, and presumably the media conglomerate had renewed it. But in this timeline, Melissa had never gotten the domain. She'd never gotten anything, except I'd been tracking something in the background, a domain registration under her name, melissaleemedia.com. She'd registered it in March 2019, right around when she'd started plotting to take Tech Vista from me. It was a vanity domain, probably intended to be her personal brand platform after she'd successfully stolen my work. She'd never built anything on it, but she'd been paying the registration fees every year, $10 annually, probably out of spite, or maybe hope that she'd eventually use it for something. I'd checked the registration date. March 15th, 2019. 10-year registration, which meant it would auto-renew in March 2029 unless she failed to pay. But here's what I'd learned in 8 years of running a digital business. People who are broke and bitter often forget to update their credit card information with domain registrars. In January 2024, I got a tip from a source at the consulting firm Melissa had briefly worked for. She'd been trying to get her job back, or any job really, and she'd been rejected. She was running out of money. She was desperate. I pulled her credit report, perfectly legal when you're running financial due diligence through the proper channels. Multiple missed payments, credit card accounts closed, a car repossession, she was drowning. In February 2024, I set up monitoring on melissaleemedia.com. I got an alert if the registration status changed. On March 15th, 2024, at 11:47 p.m. Pacific time, the domain registration expired. She'd forgotten to pay the $10 renewal fee. The domain entered a grace period. She had 45 days to renew it at the standard rate before it went into redemption, where it would cost hundreds to recover. After that, it would be released to the public. I waited. April 30th, 2024. The grace period ended. The domain entered redemption status. Melissa could still get it back, but now it would cost about $200 plus the renewal fee. I knew she didn't have $200. I waited. May 30th, 2024. The redemption period ended. The domain was deleted from the registry, June 4th, 2024. The domain became available for public registration again. I was sitting at my desk in my home office, watching the waves crash against the rocks below when the registrar status changed from pending delete to available. I registered melissaleemedia.com for $10. Then I sat back and thought about what to do with it. I could have just let it sit there, a quiet trophy of her failure. But that wasn't enough. She'd tried to destroy me. She'd tried to steal the work I'd built with my own hands and mind. She'd convinced our parents to threaten me with legal action. She'd lied about me to anyone who would listen. She deserved more than obscurity. She deserved to see exactly what she'd lost. I built a website on melissaleemedia.com. The homepage was simple. A professional headshot of Melissa from her consulting days, the one she'd used on LinkedIn, where she looked confident and successful. Below it, a single line of text, the rise and fall of Melissa Lee. Then, a timeline. Every lie she'd told about me, documented with screenshots and witness statements. Every instance of credit she'd stolen from colleagues, corroborated by those colleagues who'd been brave enough to come forward. Every manipulative conversation preserved in text messages that my lawyer had obtained through discovery during the lawsuit. I didn't editorialize, I didn't add commentary. I just presented the facts, organized chronologically, with sources cited for everything. At the bottom of the page, this domain was registered by Melissa Lee in March 2019. She allowed it to expire in March 2024. It was purchased for $10 on June 4th, 2024 by Claire Lee, the sister whose work she tried to steal. I didn't promote the site. I didn't share it on social media. I didn't need to. When you Google Melissa Lee, the third result right below her abandoned LinkedIn and above her defunct Twitter is melissaleemedia.com. The internet takes care of the rest. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she found out about the site 2 weeks after I launched it. She called me, the first time in 4 years, screaming and crying. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail. "You're destroying my life. I can't get a job because of this. Every interview, they find this site. You're so fucking cruel, Claire. I'm your sister." I deleted the voicemail without responding. Because she wasn't my sister, not really. A sister wouldn't have spent years undermining me, lying about me, trying to steal from me. A sister would have celebrated my success, not resented it. Blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty does. Love does. Respect does. And she'd had none of those things for me. It's September 2024 now, 10 years since I first registered techvista.com in this timeline, 8 years since I bought it back in the original timeline, except that never happened anymore. That timeline was erased when I woke up in my 22-year-old body, choking on air instead of water. Tech Vista Media is valued at $300 million. We're planning to go public next year. I've been on the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and Time. I give talks at conferences about digital media and entrepreneurship. I mentor young journalists and startup founders. I have a partner now, someone I met at a technology ethics summit, someone who knew me before they knew about my money, someone who sees me as a complete person rather than a resource to exploit. We're building a life together that has nothing to do with my past and everything to do with our future. My family has tried to reconcile. My mother sends birthday cards that I don't open. My father had my uncle reach out to ask if we could put the past behind us. Melissa created a new email address to send me a long apology that my assistant filtered before I ever saw it. I don't respond to any of it. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty, if I think I'm being too harsh, too unforgiving. I think about the girl standing on that bridge, so destroyed by their betrayal that death seemed preferable to watching them celebrate stealing her life's work. I think about the decade I lost in that timeline, the version of me who died believing she was worthless, believing she'd been lucky rather than talented, believing her family's lies about her own inadequacy. I think about the fact that they didn't try to make amends until after I became undeniably successful, that their apologies only came when it became clear that I didn't need them, that I'd never needed them, and I don't feel guilty at all. I feel free. The domain name sitting in my registrar account, melissaleemedia.com, purchased for $10, that reminder of her failure and my victory, is worth nothing financially. I'll probably never do anything else with it, but every time I see it in my list of domains, I smile. Because it represents something important, the exact moment when I stopped being the sister they could push around and became the woman they couldn't touch. Some people say revenge is hollow, that it doesn't bring satisfaction, that the best revenge is living well. They're wrong. The best revenge is living well and making sure the people who tried to destroy you have to watch you do it from the ruins of their own ambitions, standing on the grave of the opportunities they squandered because they were too busy trying to steal yours. I bought that domain back for $10, but what I really bought was proof that I'd won, and that's worth everything.